G'day, in this video I'm going to go through how I pour small slabs. Anything under 0.4 of a cubic metre I would class as a small slab. So let's get into it. So once we've worked out how big our shed needs to be, we need to find the site that we're going to put it at, and then we need to mark it out roughly with some spray paint and tape. So our shed is 1200. We're just going to put a little mark there, and we want it to be 1200 off the building. So we put another mark there, and then we want it to be 2.4 wide, and that's it. So now we've got our rough outer space marked out. We'll get a level, and we'll make this surface as level as we can, so that we don't have to put too much concrete in to make a nice flat and level slab. Okay, so we can see here, this is our lowest point. We've worked that out from our levels. So we want to make sure that the rest of the slab space will match up to that as best we can. So we use our level and we just dig it into the ground a little bit. Make that level. And then we can use a shovel just to scrape out from there and get that as level and as flat and as compact as we can. Alright, so we've levelled our site and we've made sure we've gone 100 or 200 mil beyond where our actual slab's going to be, to make sure we've got space to get our formwork in there and our pegs in there, and there's not going to be any dirt getting in our way. Just make sure we're level and flat, so we've used the level as a straight edge to scrape it over the dirt and get it nice and flat. And then once you've done that, you want to compact it, because you don't want this to be loose and soft underneath. You want it to be nice and firm so that your slab won't move unevenly and crack. So to compact underneath your slab, you can use one of these stampers, or you can use your feet and really jump up and down. You can use a rake, just anything that's got a nice flat surface that you can ram into the ground and just get it as nice, as solid as you can. Make sure there's no soft, fluffy, loose dirt anywhere. But we're going to use one of these. So go over it a few times to get it nice and flat. Ideally, under a slab you put a layer of crushed rock. Because this is just a bike shed, it's not going to have much weight. It's barely going to move. So we'll put a small layer of rock under it, but that's about it. Okay, so we've got our area prepped. Now we need to do our formwork, which is the boundary that's going to hold the concrete in place until the concrete dries. Like I said, we don't want anything thinner than 70 mil, but we're going to use some 90 mil timber to make our formwork. Just a couple of pieces or sticks. You want them to be relatively straight, so it's nice and straight along the edge of your slab, and then you want a spirit level to make sure you can make that formwork level. You want some sort of hammer so you can bang some pegs in to hold that in place, a square, pencil, tape measure and all your safety gear, and a circular saw to cut the formwork, or a hand saw will do the job, anything that you can cut timber with. So we've determined the length of our formwork, we'll measure it out, 2430, square that up. Have our circular saw, make sure we've got our safety gear on, earplugs and specs. We'll cut that, and then we'll cut the rest of the pieces. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do after we've cut all our formwork pieces is we want to fix them together. Now you could just do this with a hammer and nails. That's obviously the cheapest and easiest way to do it for those people who don't have all the tools. But I'm going to screw it together, because if you screw it together it's easier to pull apart your formwork later to release it and get the concrete fully exposed around the edges. So, whenever I'm fixing things together with screws, I will always pre-drill. It's very rare that I don't pre-drill. Got some 75mm screws here. Most important thing is that we're flush at the top. It doesn't really matter what's going on underneath. The top of our slab is what we want to be nice and consistent and flat, so that's where we make sure we're flush. Okay, so we've cut all our formwork and we've secured it together with screws, making sure that everything is cut to the same length, therefore everything is parallel, therefore it makes it easier to square it up, which we'll get into. Now I've got a couple of pegs, we're going to bang these in the corners. Now, we need to make sure we've got the distance that we wanted off our building, so I checked that, I'm happy with that. Now we want to find out, and we want to get this formwork level. And to get this level and then secured in place, you want to find the highest point of the ground, basically, because from that point everything can be lifted up to make your slab level. Now, by doing that, all you need to do is check everything for level. Now I can see here that this side here needs to come up to be level. And I can see across the front that we're very good. And I can see across this side, that's very good. And I can see across here that that's very good. Actually, this side here might need to come up just a tiny bit. So therefore, this is our highest point because everywhere else either needs to stay where it is or come up. So what we'll do is we'll bang a peg in here, we'll secure that, and then from there we'll work our way round, checking out there, checking across there, and then checking everything at the end to make sure that the whole formwork is level. Now, little things to consider here are we don't want our slab hard against the fence. We want it to come off a bit so the cladding of our shed can slip down beside that so water doesn't run into our shed. We also want to think about if this was, say, a water tank slab or something like that against the building, you want the water to run away from the building. So if anything, you make the slab slightly at a level but leaning away from the surface you don't want to get wet, which would be the building, the fence, or whatever else you're working up against. Okay, we'll get this peg in. Grab our little peg. We'll tap that in. It really isn't doing much, it's just holding this formwork in place. Now I like to always get these pegs down below the top of our formwork so that we can make sure that when you're screeding, you don't hit those pegs, they don't get in the way. You can cut them off later though. Now once you've got one peg secured, we know what we need to do to get level. So we can leave that, but now we want to make sure that our slab is square. To do that, you want to measure from the corner to the corner and then check it against the other side and make sure those numbers are the same. Always make sure you're hooking your tape on exactly the same spot and measuring to the same side of the tape. So we're going to run it over here. And we've got 27.17. I'm going to measure from the same place on the other side. Corner to corner, we've got 27.17. That means we're bang on square because we've cut all our timber parallel the same length and we've measured it, and corner to corner it's getting the same number, so we're square. So now we want to make sure that that stays right there. So we'll position our peg, make sure we're not going to hit rocks and move our formwork around. Tap that in. We're going to hit a rock there, so we'll just move our peg. Alright, so there's a rock under there, but that's in far enough that it's going to hold it. So now, I'll grab my 1200 level, and I'll get this level. So that's going to come up a little bit. Yeah, so I can hold that in position. This is why clamps are so handy. They become an extra set of hands. Hold that there. Now I'll get my screw in. Beautiful. Check that. And that's spot on. So once we've got two pegs in, we double check everything as we go. So we've got that, we're happy with that for level. Now I'm going to double check this square because I know my number is 27.17, and I'll double check, yep, I've still got 27.17, so nothing's moved. Now these pegs are doing two things. They're holding the formwork up at the right height to make sure we've got a level slab, but they're also supporting the formwork so that it doesn't push out when the concrete goes in. Because we're only doing a 90mm slab in here, there's not a lot of force on it, so we'll probably only need one on each corner and then one in the middle here, and that'll just stop that from bowing out. Now if you want this to be nice and straight, you can either side it or you can use a string line, and make sure once you fix your two corners in, because they're a fixed point, because that's where your formwork's screwed, you can sight that middle and get a peg in the middle and make sure that's straight, and then you'll have a nice straight slab. So we've got this one and this one in. Now we're going to work our way over to that corner, get that level, and then we'll get this one level over the other corner, and then we'll check the back to make sure everything's working as it's supposed to. So now we need to work out how much Rio we need, which is the reinforcement metal that go inside this slab to keep it nice and strong. And then we also want to work out the quantity of concrete. So we know the slab size internally is 2350, so that's 2.35 times 1150, which is 1.15. Now these timbers are 90 mil, and you can see that after we've leveled this whole formwork up, it's up a bit higher there. So we're going to allow 100 mil, which is 0.1. So we're going to do that sum on our calculator. 2.35 times 1.15 times 0.1 equals 0.27. Now, the smallest batch of concrete you can order from a concrete truck, will deliver it out to you, is 0.6. That's the smallest batch they can do here where we are, in a little mini mix. Otherwise, the quantities don't work and they can't mix it in their machine. So our options are to order 0.6, which is going to cost us here now $295 delivered, and then we have to send that 0.3 back that we don't need, and sometimes they'll charge you for that, or we can get bags of concrete. And the third option would be a dry mix, which is from a sand and soil place. You order a dry mix, which will be the aggregate and the sand mixed together, and then all we need to do is add the cement and the water and mix it up ourselves. Now, it's always a bit of a balancing act. This slab is right on the size that you want to order bags on. Anything bigger than this and I get a truck, but for this I'm going to get bags. Now, there are 120 kilogram bags in 1 cubic meter of concrete. So we're going to need about 27 bags of pre-mixed concrete to make this work. You do not want to be short, so I would always get a few more and then take the extras back. That's the advantage of buying it from a big hardware store. So those bags are $9 each at the moment. So we've got, let's say, 30 bags times $9. Alright, so 30 times 9 equals $270. And that's why I say that this size slab, which is 0.3 of a metre, or just under, is right on the cusp of where you still mix it up with bags. Now, the disadvantage to bags, you've got to go and get the bags, or you've got to pay for delivery with the bags. So you've got to have a car that's big enough to carry the bags, or you're going to have to do multiple trips to the hardware store. And then, on top of that, you need to use your labour to mix that concrete. The advantage to bags is that you can do it at your pace. When you get a truck delivered out, they're going to come and they get half an hour and that's it. Some people are really nice and they'll give you much longer and it's fine. But other people, they're busy, they've got lots of deliveries to do in that day, they'll give you the half an hour and that's it. And if you're not ready and if you don't have enough wheelbarrows here to move that concrete, they'll start charging you for the extra time. So that's why on small slabs, I'll always use bags because it works out slightly cheaper, even though per metre bagged concrete is far more expensive. But for a small slab, we save a bit of money on not having to send that 0.3 back, and we don't have to order extra concrete that we don't need, and we can mix it ourselves at our own pace. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay some black plastic inside here, which is going to go under the concrete to stop moisture wicking up through the soil, through the ground, up into my slab and getting inside my shed. You do not have to do this for a shed, it's not required. In a house, you definitely need to do that. The downside to putting plastic under a slab is that it's going to take longer for this concrete to go off. But again, my place, I don't mind, and I want a good job, not a quick job. So I'm going to lay the plastic down, make sure you get nice thick plastic. You'll be able to look up the thicknesses there that you require for a slab. You don't want it too thin because you'll just puncture it too easily. So we're just going to lay this out, trim it off, and then we're going to move into putting our Rio in, our bar chairs, which holds the Rio up. We'll start pouring our slab. We've got our black plastic in there and we've trimmed it off, especially at the back that we won't have access to once we've poured that slab. At the front and at the side it's not as important because we can trim that later. Okay, so we're ready for pouring. We've got a couple of trowels here that we need. This one here is an edging trowel that just rounds the edge, the corner over there, so that you don't have a sharp edge of concrete that will chip away. That rounds it over nicely. When we get to finishing, you'll see that in use. And then we've got a couple of finishing trowels. We'll use this one to push the concrete around and get it in up against the formwork, and we'll probably use this one to finish it. They're both steel trowels. Alright, we've got our 30 bags of concrete ready to go, all set up. This is my preferred method of mixing pre-mixed concrete. We've got bags all set to go. We've got lots of buckets. Now we've read the back of the bag, 2.5 litres of water per 20 kilo bag. We've worked out what 2.5 litres of water is in this bucket. We'll put it in each one of these buckets. We've got a full bucket here to keep this mixer nice and clean so the concrete doesn't get stuck on our auger bit. Now this is my preferred method, this one. It's definitely not the quickest. You can mix in a wheelbarrow, you can mix in a big tub with a shovel, that's fine. I just find this is the least labour intensive way of going about it and also gets you the best, most consistent results. So you read the bag, get the amount of water, put it in your bucket, you tip the bag in and you start mixing. Now over here, we've got our Rio. Really important, we've cut our Rio to size. Now our Rio is smaller than our opening. You do not want your Rio sticking up hard against the formwork because that will mean it's exposed to the outside, outside the concrete. And if you get that exposed, eventually that Rio is going to rust. That rust will spread into your Rio all the way through here. Then you get what's called concrete cancer, which is when the concrete will start to crumble and deteriorate really quickly. So we cut our Rio, usually 50 mil either side smaller than the inside of our box. And then we lay our Rio in, we make sure it's not sitting hard down. We've got a couple of bar chairs here to keep it up. And as we're pouring the concrete, we'll make sure that Rio's as close to the middle of the slab as possible, because it's only a 100 mil slab, that's where we want it. And bit by bit, we'll just fill this up. Alright, so we've got our bag, we're all ready to go. 2.5 litres of water in there. Make sure that's good. Alright, so that's the consistency we want. If you see that, it'll push around pretty easy. That's a pretty good consistency, we're happy with that. And we'll start in our furthest point. We'll tip it in and we'll just keep mixing and just keep working from one spot out, and then we'll get across to there and we'll work across here. And I'll show you how we screed it, which is getting it flat with the formwork, and then we'll start drilling. Okay, so we're starting to get somewhere now. We've got a few buckets in. So I highly recommend, if you're doing something like this, to get a second person, because if you're doing this by yourself, you will be under the pump, especially on a 30-degree day. Rightio, so we just get our trowel and we just push that concrete to the edge and keep it nice and flat. And when we get there, give it a few little pumps. And that pushes the rock down below the surface a little bit, and also make sure that we won't have any air pockets around the edges. So we're vibrating the concrete as we go. Here we go, we've got our water. Now as we've been mixing, we've been finding that 2.5 litres was a little bit too much, so we're going a bit less. Now each bag will vary. It's funny, they just have different amounts of moisture in these premix bags. Anyway, all we do is we've got our water there. Now we tip it around the side carefully. And that just keeps our bucket clean as we go, so we don't end up with a bunch of dirty buckets with heaps of concrete on them. Cut that bag open, and we tip it in. Always being very careful, we're working close to a building here, we're working on some finished stones, so we're going to clean up as we go to make sure we don't make a mess. Right, so we've got it, and we're happy with that fullness now. We're a little bit over full, which is how I like it, to make sure it's going to end up nice and flat. You can see the moisture's working its way to the top. As you get excess along, just use your trowel to push it out in front of yourself, push it off the edge if you need, and just make sure that that level is touching the formwork the whole way and doesn't drop down. And you just side to side, shimmy, 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 shimmy. Making sure no rocks are underneath it. Going along nicely. Just keep shimmy, shimmying. Alright, we're getting close to the end, and we can see we've got too much concrete. Not too much, we've actually done really well here now. Good job. So we'll scoop a bit out just to make our life a bit easier. holes back in. We're going to drag it all the way across. And we'll just finish off the very edge with the trowel. Rightio, so we've poured our slab, we've screeded it. How long has that taken? About 30 minutes, 40 minutes maybe? With 2 people mixing up with the drill and the paddle. It's pretty hot today and it'll go off relatively quick, so we'll keep a close eye on it. Okay, so we've let our slab sit for a bit. It really varies on the weather, the temperature, how much wind there is, how wet your slab is, if you've got plastic underneath it, so you really just need to keep an eye on it. Most of the moisture off the top, it's gone for now. So what I'm going to do is run this edger around, and that just clears the rocks from those edges and breaks the corner, so you get a nice rounded corner so that the concrete won't chip away later, and it just leaves a better finish. We're building a shed on 3 of the walls, so these 3 aren't important, but the front one will, because that'll be a door. So anyway, we'll just run this through now. You want to run this through when the concrete's relatively soft, so you can knock those rocks out of the way nice and easy, because if this gets too hard, those rocks won't come out of the way and make a bit of a mess of it. So just work it in there. Back and forth, a little bit of a lift up, whichever direction you're going. And then if you feel it just starts to get smooth. Just clearing those rocks out the front. See, this is a bit firmer. This one's in the sun a bit more, so it's gone off a bit more. So it's just a little bit harder to do, but we'll still be able to do it. Now we're going to do a bit of a float with our steel trowel, really light pressure. We're just going to run it. Just clean my knees. We're just going to run it across the top of that. And this just knocks the big rocks down. And I'll do this a couple of times, just works that moisture up. You can see I'm just twisting the trowel a little bit, not really pushing it up. Tiny bit of pressure, just a tiny bit. Rightio, so it's time to finish our slab. All the moisture's gone off the top. It's firm to the touch. I'm not leaving any marks when I'm doing this. So now I'm getting my steel trowel, making circles, rubbing back and forth, and sometimes I'm using a spray bottle. Add a bit of water just to help smooth it out and get rid of the little air bubbles that are there. Now if you wanted to get a rougher finish, you go on it about half an hour before, maybe 20 minutes before this, and then you can just do swirls and that'll leave like a rippled effect. That's a nice easy finish to get for our first time slab, but I want a nice smooth finish, so I'm going to polish it. So there we are, all polished, looking nice and smooth, no more texture. We're all done, and tomorrow we'll strip the formwork, and that'll be that.